Hey, it's Chris Beyer.
Chris Bowling.
CB, we've got Josh Gibb, CEO of the Galesburg Community Foundation, again for part two.
Yes,
Hey,
thank you.
Josh, good to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting me have another whack at it, guys.
Absolutely.
Loved part one. Actually learned a few things through part one. So thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
old dog, new tricks. This is fantastic, CB. So, Josh, we talked a lot about what the foundation is, some of your background, how you help, and what foundations do for their communities. But I wanted to dive deeper into the fact that we are in a rural community. You and I have both grown up in Western Illinois most of our life.
Yep.
We know it's very small communities, lots of agriculture, lots of good family businesses. But what does philanthropy look like here compared to, maybe a metro community in Chicago or somewhere else in the country? I mean, it's got to be different, even though the concept of supporting nonprofits is still the same.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about Illinois, I say often Illinois is a long state, and so both its opportunities and its issues are probably though the same from like across the entire state, but its advantages are kind of within the geography and again within the assets that exist, right? So rural communities aren't in terms of what makes them different is their geography, and what makes them different is the natural advantages that they have. So specifically, I think around rural communities, they're small, they're close knit. There's a lot of family approach to it. I think that there is just an embedded philanthropic approach. I think about growing up. So I grew up in Roseville, is where I grew up, and I think about the meals that our family would make for others. I think about farmers who weren't able to bring in a crop, and you see that you
everybody covers for them.
Right. It's an organic sort of philanthropy where, at least in metro areas, urban areas that I've seen, it's very formal. So I think that in part because there's a concentration of that sort of wealth. And so you see this formalized private foundations and small private foundations. And, but in areas like ours, it's a little bit more natural and organic and maybe informal.
I think that's well said.
But I guess I was just going to say, in terms of what the opportunities are, I think that the opportunities are just as equal here as they are anyplace.
Yeah. Well, I know on the horizon, we've got a lot of wealth being transferred within the rural communities. And you think of how long family farms have been in the family, and that next generation is going to be passing that along. Maybe family isn't wanting to take the farm on, but also you think, Chris, you and I talk through so many businesses that are trying to figure out the third generation. Does it become a fourth or something like that? But Josh, what's on the horizon that you've started to see that really we should start thinking about now as a younger population about what's going to happen?
So at least, and so I'm just going to give some numbers specific to our area.
Yeah.
There's actually a report that the State Association of Community Foundations, it's called the Alliance of Illinois Community Foundations. We co-funded with Forefront, which is a state association for nonprofit organizations and philanthropy. But this co-funded report called the Transfer of Wealth gives an actuarial number. And so Knox and Warren counties, the actuarial number that transfers in the next 10 years is 2.1 billion with a B dollars. So
and again, about 70,000 in population, as you'd said.
70,000 in population, two counties in Illinois, $2.1 billion in the next 10 years, which sounds unreal. But then when you start thinking about it, think about the baby boom generation, think about, them aging, and then that next generation coming up. So there's this opportunity for that generation to take a look and say, well, what really does happen to that wealth? Do we transfer it all to the next generation? If we do transfer it, where does that generation live? Because in rural communities, and again, this is a Knox County number. I don't know Knox and Warren, but I imagine it's exactly the same. In the last census, we lost 5% of our population.
Yeah.
In comparison to the state that lost 1% of its population.
Wow.
So we lost people faster in Knox County. Now,
so that wealth could very easily be attributed to someplace else around the country if it's structured as it is today. Yeah.
Yep. And once it's gone forever. Yeah. So community foundations and philanthropic options become a way in which families can create legacy for themselves, legacy
Yeah.
for communities, revenue streams for the nonprofits that are serving the people that are here. And again, I think people should transfer wealth to the next generation.
Right.
I'm not saying that it should come to nonprofit organizations. I'm just saying individuals, I think, have should take more evaluation of how can nonprofits be a part of estate planning.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I know you and I have known each other now for about 12 years, Josh, and a few years ago, you helped our family get a donor advised fund set up with the foundation.
Yeah.
Specifically for the fact that as we identify things as a family that we want to contribute toward, that are passions for us, it just makes it simpler for us to say, okay, we give our money to the foundation, and then when the opportunity comes, the foundation sends that out. But that's also helped us now as we look at some point to inherit from our parents' generation. When we receive that money, it's more set up for us to be able to use a portion of that and not just wait until we die to leave something to a nonprofit. So why should somebody consider a donor advised fund and start thinking about how they give well before their estate comes into play?
Well, it's been a lot of fun to work with your family, and as
Well, thank you.
I like to say, you guys are rock stars. And
Thanks, sir.
your daughter is a star. Let's just say it.
Yes. Yes.
So, people who should think about or could think about donor advised funds are those that want to start thinking about being a little bit more formal with their philanthropy, right?
Yeah.
The community foundation does that. So if you give to multiple things and you don't want to write all those checks, a donor advised fund becomes a good place to do it. Because of the way deductions work, if you have the ability, now the standardized deduction is high. There's a lot of people who aren't itemizing charitable giving. So if you've got people that are kind of on that bubble, there's some strategy to use donor advised funds to sort of bank in 1 year. So make a large gift in 1 year and then spend that out over 2 years. Donor advised funds can allow some strategy there. But I do think that it becomes sort of that next place for, the first place for the next conversation, right? It's that, okay, well, I didn't understand this about that nonprofit. You can use a donor advised fund and then the community foundation that's hosting it to really get to know the nonprofits, understand what they're doing, understand what their needs are. And I think that's what the Galesburg Community Foundation does really well.
Yeah. And I think, as anybody's listening to this, there's that concept through all different foundations. Obviously, we've experienced it well, being in the Galesburg community. But it's just, it makes it simpler. And then when there is an urgent need, we get communication that, hey, if you've got funds available, here's where it could go and make an immediate impact, rather than us having to try to keep a pulse on what organization is in need. Because there's hundreds and hundreds of opportunities to give. So
but your family is passionate about, of those 105. And there's benefit in the community foundation being aware of what you're passionate about and making sure that you know what those things are. And then with the rest of our donor advisors, understanding what they're passionate about and connecting them. Passionate donors connected to the thing that really encourages their heart the most, they give in meaningful ways. And I feel like sometimes, what nonprofits do is like, well, I have a really great mission, everybody should give to it. It's true, you do have a really great mission, but the people who should give to it are those that are encouraged by what it is that you do, who are connected to what it is that you do. A connected donor becomes an impactful donor. And that's what the Community Foundation strives to do.
No, well said. Well, we're coming up at the end of part 2. Appreciate you, Josh, again, just sharing a little bit more about our local community. I know, Chris, you and I work with so many companies that are in the rural parts of Illinois and Iowa, and I think this is a very timely discussion.
Yeah, this was great.
Well, in those companies, they can really make a difference too. And so formalized philanthropy, use your community foundation as a way to do it.
Excellent. Thanks again, Josh. Good to see you.
Thank you, Josh.
Good to see you guys. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we'll see you.